August 25th, 1944, northern France. The smoke of retreat still drifted across the fields outside Chartres. Inside a commandeered farmhouse, Colonel Hans von Mellenthin examined a captured American map, red arrows stretching too far east. Patton's Third Army had advanced beyond its fuel depots. Tanks dry, trucks idle, supply lines hundreds of miles long. "They've outrun their gasoline," he said. The officers laughed. They knew logistics better than anyone. Napoleon had learned it. Hitler had learned it. Speed without supply ended in disaster. Outside, horses hauled German wagons past burned vehicles. In the Wehrmacht, even tanks waited for fuel. The Americans would be no different. At dusk, the sound reached them, low, continuous, mechanical. Not artillery, engines, thousands of them. From Normandy, a line of trucks began to move east. 6,000 vehicles, 23,000 drivers, headlights taped, windshields marked with red circles. The Red Ball Express. Each truck carried 5 tons of fuel, ammunition, or rations. They drove day and night, 400 miles round trip, 35 mph average. Orders were absolute. No stopping, no turning, no hesitation. The convoys started without ceremony. Drivers climbed into cabs slick with oil and dust. The first column left before midnight. Others followed every 5 minutes. Within hours, a new highway existed where none had been planned. One route east, one west, both one way, guarded by military police. Any vehicle not marked with the red circle was removed at gunpoint. Traffic discipline was total. Most of the men behind the wheels were African American, serving in segregated units under white officers. They carried the fuel that kept the Third Army alive. One wrote later, "We hauled gas like it was blood. It wasn't metaphor. Every can mattered. Without it, tanks stopped, advances froze, victories vanished." German intelligence watched the headlights stretch for miles and dismissed it as madness. Continuous movement under air-visible conditions violated every principle of warfare. But the Americans were not hiding. They were moving faster than the Luftwaffe could respond. The Germans had counted miles, fuel, and time. The Americans multiplied them. By the time Mellenthin's staff realized the noise wasn't retreat but pursuit, Patton's tanks were already crossing the Seine. The laughter in that farmhouse never returned. The roads of France had come alive. How did America turn fuel and distance into a weapon no army could stop? After D-Day, success created its own crisis. The Allied advance outpaced every prediction. By August 1944, armored divisions were moving faster than supply columns could follow. Each day forward stretched the line thinner. An armored division burned 150,000 gallons of fuel per day. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies. Normandy to the Seine was 400 miles. Every mile added friction. The geography compounded the problem. The ports lay in ruins, railways were wrecked, bridges destroyed. German engineers had turned retreat into sabotage. Freight yards were craters, roads cratered by bombers. Allied planners faced a simple equation. Without fuel, the offensive stopped. The Germans expected that outcome. Their analysts calculated that Patton's Third Army would stall within days. "Physical laws cannot be violated," wrote General Westphal. "Even American industry cannot create distance from nothing." Eisenhower refused to slow down. General John C.H. Lee, head of logistics, proposed an alternative to the broken rail system, an uninterrupted motor highway reserved for supplies alone, a one-way loop, trucks east with cargo, west empty, constant motion. The name came from railroad slang. Red Ball meant express freight. The Red Ball Express was approved in minutes. Orders spread through France. Every available truck was seized, stripped, and reassigned. Drivers were drawn from quartermaster and engineer units, many with minimal training. On August 25th, the first convoys rolled from Saint-Lô. Red circles painted on fenders marked authority. 2 parallel roads, 1 forward, 1 return. Convoy intervals, 5 minutes. Maximum speed, 35 miles per hour. Operation, 24 hours continuous. At its peak, the Express fielded 6,000 trucks and 23,000 drivers. Fuel consumption reached 300,000 gallons daily just to sustain itself. Mobile maintenance units followed every 50 miles. Mechanics triaged breakdowns, 15 minutes to repair or push off. Spare engines were hoisted by cranes on the roadside. By September, deliveries averaged 12,000 tons per day. To the Germans, it seemed impossible. Their own transport relied on horses and limited fuel reserves. Their divisions crawled while Pattons rolled. Captured diaries described disbelief. "They burn fuel to move fuel," wrote one officer, "and never run out." The difference was industrial arithmetic. The United States refined 1.8 billion barrels in 1944, Germany 33 million. The ratio was fatal. The Express operated as an ecosystem: depots, refueling points, traffic police, workshops, and rest camps, forming a moving grid across France. Every failure was compensated by redundancy. 10% of vehicles were always deadlined. The system absorbed loss like an organism healing itself. Eisenhower called it a miracle of motion. It wasn't a miracle. It was scale. To Germans, logistics was an art of precision. To Americans, it was mass production applied to war. When bridges failed, engineers built new ones overnight. When routes jammed, bulldozers carved new lanes. The system evolved faster than plans could record. By September, the Red Ball Express delivered 412,000 tons of supplies. Patton's advance exceeded every estimate. The Wehrmacht, still calculating limits by rail speed and fuel availability, watched an army that ignored both. The war had become mathematics in motion. How long could men and machines sustain that equation before it consumed them? Saint-Lô, August 25, 1944. The first convoys formed before dawn. Mechanics fueled engines in mud. Drivers checked tires by flashlight. MPs cleared civilians from the road. Orders were clear: keep Patton supplied. Nothing else mattered. 6,000 trucks assembled, GMCs, Studebakers, Dodges, each carrying between 2 and 5 tons. Drivers worked in pairs, one driving while the other slept upright. The system functioned by rhythm, not rest. Convoys ran 24 hours a day. Each truck burned 50 gallons per trip, often carrying twice that in cargo. Engines idled constantly. Cold starts were forbidden. The route stretched 400 miles east to the front. 2 lanes, 1 forward, 1 return. Red circles marked priority. Military police enforced speed and spacing. Any vehicle below 20 miles per hour was pulled aside. Drivers navigated by memory through blackout. Only the faint glow of the truck ahead showed the road. Accidents were frequent. Collisions, fires, and mechanical failures were constant background noise. 3/4 of the drivers were African-American soldiers. Their names rarely appeared in reports, but their trucks did. They painted slogans: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler's Milk Truck, Detroit to Berlin Express. They drove through fatigue and shellfire, maintaining a tempo no textbook predicted. Their survival rate was lower than frontline infantry, but their success rate was absolute. Mobile repair crews followed every column. Engines replaced in 45 minutes, gearboxes swapped on site. The rule: 15 minutes to fix, otherwise push off the road. Every day, 1,800 trucks broke down, and 1,500 were back within 24 hours. It was the definition of efficiency through redundancy. German observers watching from ridge lines mistook the lights for troop movements. Reconnaissance reports described an unending column visible for 20 kilometers. They move as if connected, one officer wrote. He wasn't wrong. The Express had become an organism, self-repairing, self-feeding, self-moving. By mid-September, the system achieved peak performance. 132 companies operating simultaneously, 12,000 tons delivered daily. The Americans had transformed improvisation into doctrine. German analysts dismissed it as wasteful, chaotic, impossible to sustain. They didn't understand that waste was built into the design. The Express accepted mechanical attrition as routine, human exhaustion as inevitable, and progress as non-negotiable. It wasn't order that kept it alive, but motion. By autumn 1944, American logistics reached dimensions unseen in warfare. 300,000 military trucks in Europe, 80 million gallons of fuel per month, 412,000 tons delivered over 82 days. The Red Ball Express became not a convoy, but a moving nation. Factories in Detroit, St. Louis, and Cleveland ran day and night. A new truck left assembly lines every 7 minutes. Replacement engines, tires, and axles filled Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic. For every truck in France, 2 waited in depots. The system had depth measured in oceans. Each part was standardized. Mechanics replaced components rather than repaired them. A transmission swap took 20 minutes, an engine, 45. Vehicles lasted 10,000 miles, 1/3 of design life, but new ones arrived faster than the old could die. German industry, decentralized and under bombardment, couldn't replicate it. Their divisions fought with 600,000 horses and incompatible trucks. American fuel consumption dwarfed the Reich's entire capacity. U.S. refineries produced 1.8 billion barrels in 1944. Germany managed 33 million. Pluto pipelines pumped gasoline directly from Britain under the Channel to Cherbourg. Tanker trucks distributed it every 25 miles along Red Ball routes. A single depot near Reims stored more fuel than the Wehrmacht's Eastern armies combined. To German eyes, it looked like carelessness. They saw Americans discarding full cans, burning spare tires, wasting light. They mistook confidence for disorder. "They burn what we save," wrote one captured colonel, "and win because of it." Behind the front, engineers rebuilt France into a machine. Depots, fuel farms, and maintenance yards appeared overnight. In Verdun, 1.5 million gallons of gasoline were stored in a single valley. In Chartres, stacks of rations reached 6 meters high. Logistics had become architecture. The Wehrmacht's trains lay twisted on their tracks. American convoys rolled over them. What German doctrine called waste, the Americans called capacity. What the Germans feared as exhaustion, the Americans treated as throughput. Patton understood. "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks must have gas," he said. The Red Ball Express delivered it. Every mile of advance consumed another, but the system never stopped. For every gallon burned, 10 arrived behind it. By the time the Germans realized what they were facing, it was no longer an army. It was an industry in motion. How do you fight an enemy whose logistics move faster than your armies? The Red Ball Express drivers paid a cost that German observers never measured. They worked without sleep, without armor, and without recognition. 75% were African American. They served under segregation, but kept the Allied armies alive. Each driver averaged 18 to 20 hours on the road daily with barely 3 hours of rest. Convoys moved nearly 400 miles round trip in blackout conditions. No headlights, no markers, no pauses. Every 5 minutes, another truck left the depot. Fatigue became the invisible enemy. Accidents multiplied. Collisions in fog, trucks overturned on narrow roads, brakes failed on slopes slick with mud. When a vehicle crashed, the next pushed it aside and kept moving. Stopping was forbidden. Time meant fuel, and fuel meant Patton's advance. Military records counted roughly 300 drivers killed and thousands injured. The average truck survived 10,000 miles before replacement. Engines were swapped out by mobile cranes on the roadside every 48 hours. Repair crews had 15 minutes to fix or discard. Vehicles left unrepaired were stripped for parts within an hour. Engines ran until failure, then were replaced again. Nothing was wasted because nothing was saved. The convoys consumed 300,000 gallons of fuel daily to deliver 10 times that amount. Every run was an equation of exhaustion, distance, and consumption. Luftwaffe aircraft hunted the highways at dawn and dusk. Drivers learned to hear the dive bomber's engine before the first explosion, to kill their own motors, hit the ditches, and wait. When the sky went quiet, they started again. Rain blurred the road markings. Dust choked the carburetors. Flooded bridges collapsed under the weight of loaded trucks, yet the convoys rolled, headlights covered, drivers navigating by the faint glow of the vehicle ahead. Hallucinations were common. Shadows moving in fog, voices on dead radios. Benzodrine tablets and cold coffee replaced sleep. They called the visions seeing the red ball. Segregation marked every unit. White officers commanded, black drivers obeyed. They were paid less, promoted rarely, and cited mostly for mechanical discipline. Yet official reports described them as exceptional under continuous stress. For many, that was the only recognition they received. On the road, hierarchy dissolved. Skill replaced rank. A steady driver meant survival for the men behind him. When bridges failed, they improvised bypasses through fields. When roads jammed, they cut new routes with bulldozers. Every obstacle added time. Every minute lost threatened Patton's momentum. Statistics replaced glory. Accident rate 12%, delivery rate 100%. That ratio defined the red ball's logic. Acceptable losses so long as supplies reached the front. The mission absorbed men and machines alike. Some convoys returned half empty, others not at all. Maintenance reports noted driver collapse due to fatigue as a daily occurrence, but replacements arrived within hours. New men, same orders, keep moving. The system relied on human endurance as much as industrial capacity. By November 1944, 412,000 tons of supplies had passed through their hands. Fuel, food, ammunition, spare parts. Without them, Patton's tanks would have stood silent in the mud. They fought no battles, captured no towns, but their road never stopped. The Red Ball Express ran on gasoline, but its true fuel was motion. The men behind the wheels proved that endurance could replace heroism. They fought the road, not the enemy, and they won. How long can a machine of men and steel run before both begin to break? General George S. Patton measured victory in miles per day. In late August 1944, his Third Army moved faster than any force in modern history. 60 miles daily through France, fueled almost entirely by the Red Ball Express. Every advance consumed fuel faster than predictions. A Sherman tank required 2 gallons per mile, a half-track 1 gallon, a Jeep 1 every 10. Patton's staff calculated daily consumption at 400,000 gallons, 1.5 million liters. Without that, the Third Army stopped. At headquarters near Chartres, Patton demanded fuel as if it were ammunition. He called supply officers at dawn and midnight. My tanks are ready. My men are ready. My gas is gone. Behind the front, convoys moved day and night to meet his demands. 6,000 trucks ran 20 hours a day, headlights covered, engines droning in monotone rhythm. At loading points, drums rolled down ramps by the thousands, forming rivers of gasoline in steel and sweat. Every action of the Third Army depended on those flows. Fuel dumps emptied as fast as they filled. A single armored division burned through 300 tons of gasoline daily, and the Red Ball Express replaced it within hours. Convoys delivered fuel directly to the spearhead, refilling tanks while engines idled. Drivers operated under orders to reach the front, no matter the cost. Tire blowouts, breakdowns, and air raids slowed them, but the system adapted faster than it failed. On the ground, Patton's columns advanced in parallel lines, tanks and trucks alternating through narrow French roads. The army consumed the countryside, bridges, railways, towns, all converted into corridors for motion. German resistance collapsed faster than headquarters could track. Wehrmacht reports described the advance as liquid. One officer wrote, "They move before we can plan." That movement depended entirely on logistics. Patton's impatience bordered on obsession. He kept fuel maps on his desk and berated subordinates who underestimated consumption. When headquarters rationed gasoline to other fronts, Patton protested directly to Eisenhower. "We can take the Rhine," he insisted, "if you give me gas." His G4 logistics officer, Colonel Lewern Ayers, described their exchanges as a war within the war. The Red Ball's existence was the only reason Patton could argue at all. At the tactical level, the system became seamless. A tank company low on fuel radioed coordinates, a Red Ball convoy diverted instantly. Drivers navigated artillery zones, minefields, and collapsed roads. They offloaded fuel within sight of enemy lines, engines running, then turned back empty. The line functioned as a conveyor belt. The results were numerical proof of success. Between August 25th and September 15th, the Third Army advanced more than 400 miles, liberated over 100,000 square kilometers of territory, and captured 140,000 prisoners. German units withdrew faster than reinforcements could arrive. Ammunition expenditure doubled weekly, and the Red Ball Express delivered every round. German commanders recognized the connection. Reports from Army Group B described an enemy whose speed defies calculation. A captured major told interrogators, "We fought against your fuel, not your tanks." The Luftwaffe tried to disrupt the convoys but failed. Allied air superiority kept the routes clear. Even bad weather failed to stop them. Mud slowed movement, but not delivery. The Americans treated geography as a variable, not a limit. Patton's own writings revealed the transformation of logistics into strategy. "The motor truck is my most deadly weapon," he wrote in his field diary on September 3rd. "It carries blood, food, and death with equal efficiency." His divisions advanced through Belgium at unprecedented speed, reaching the German frontier by mid-September. Each day extended the supply line farther, but the express stretched with it, bending without breaking. Inside captured German headquarters. Abandoned maps showed supply zones calculated in kilometers per day. The Wehrmacht could not comprehend operations beyond rail range. American planners had erased that limit. They measured war in fuel tonnage, not distance. Patton's staff understood the fragility of the miracle. Every breakdown rippled backward through the system. Convoys now required more fuel to deliver fuel than some armies consumed in combat. Yet production in America replaced losses instantly. New trucks arrived in Cherbourg weekly. German officers called it industrial arrogance. It was simply capacity. The German front disintegrated. Supply columns outpaced retreating troops. Towns fell without resistance. Civilians watched as American trucks passed in endless lines, engines hot, crews silent. Behind them came tanks, infantry, artillery, each dependent on the Red Ball's rhythm. The advance toward the Moselle and the Meuse turned from attack to pursuit. By early September, Patton had reached the edge of his own success. His tanks stood 30 miles from the German border. orders came from Eisenhower to halt. Fuel diverted north to Montgomery's offensive in the Netherlands. Patton raged. "They're strangling me with my own speed," he said. His tanks stopped, not from enemy fire, but from empty tanks. The Red Ball Express had pushed human endurance to its limits, but even it could not feed two armies at once. Logistics had become the final battlefield, invisible but decisive. The army that had outrun the enemy now outran its own lifeline. The advance paused, engines cooled. For the first time in 2 months, the road went quiet. How long can momentum survive when fuel becomes the only weapon left? September 1944. The speed that had carried Patton's Third Army across France reached its limit. The Red Ball Express was still moving, but the front had advanced beyond its reach. Each mile forward cost exponentially more fuel. Supply depots were 500 miles behind. Bridges strained under the weight of constant convoys, and trucks wore through their engines faster than replacements arrived. For the first time since Normandy, Patton's tanks began to stop. At Verdun, his staff counted less than a day's fuel reserve. The offensive that had broken German lines now idled in the open, engines silent. Eisenhower ordered supplies diverted north to Montgomery's Operation Market Garden. The Third Army would have to wait. Patton protested. "My tanks can break Germany now," he told his superiors, "if you give me gas." But the numbers left no choice. The fuel that reached France could not feed every army at once. The Red Ball Express had become too successful for its own structure. What began as a 2-lane lifeline turned into a network stretched past capacity. Drivers worked to collapse, accidents increased, and vehicles failed faster than depots could repair them. The round trip to the front now took 70 hours. Engineers built bypasses and new bridges, but distance consumed efficiency. The miracle of motion had reached the edge of physics. Command friction deepened the strain. Montgomery's forces to the north received priority for fuel, aiming to strike the Ruhr through the Netherlands. Patton's advance toward the Saar halted within sight of the German border. His men waited among villages, still smoldering from combat. Infantry cleaned their weapons. Tank crews slept inside cold steel holes. Drivers from the express arrived late, exhausted, bringing too little and too late. German intelligence misread the pause as strategic exhaustion. Field Marshal Model reported to Berlin that the American advance had culminated. His prediction was only half true. The Allies had not run out of strength, only gasoline. Yet the effect was identical. The momentum that had shattered the Wehrmacht's summer line evaporated into silence. Roads once alive with engines now lay empty except for maintenance crews repairing wrecked trucks. Within Allied headquarters, arguments replaced victories. Eisenhower's broad front strategy demanded balance. Patton demanded concentration. Every gallon sent north delayed his breakthrough. Every day idle gave the enemy time to recover. "The Red Ball Express," one officer wrote, "proved we can move anything until politics decide otherwise." Logistics had won the campaign and now dictated its pause. In late September, rain returned to northern France. Mud replaced dust. Trucks bogged down in ditches. Engines stalled in floodwater. Convoys slowed to 15 miles per hour, then 10. The express still functioned, but the rhythm was gone. For the first time since August, supply failed to match demand. The turning point wasn't a battle. It was arithmetic. The line that had made Patton unstoppable became the limit that held him still. Speed had turned into distance, abundance into shortage. The same convoys that had broken Germany's will now measured America's reach. War had proven that logistics could win battles. Now it proved that logistics could end them. How far can victory travel before it outpaces its own lifeline? When the Red Ball Express ended in November 1944, the roads it created still carried the war forward. Railways reopened, pipelines extended, and the convoys dispersed into new routes: White Ball, Green Diamond, Red Lion, but the system itself dissolved overnight. 6,000 trucks, 23,000 men, 412,000 tons of supplies, 82 days of continuous operation. It vanished in 72 hours. The impact outlasted the war. The Express had proven that logistics was not support, but strategy. American industry had turned transportation into a weapon. Every mile of road in France became proof that industrial scale could replace precision, that volume could replace efficiency, that momentum could replace planning. German officers who once mocked American disorder admitted that their defeat began with those convoys. "We prepared for tanks," one wrote, "but not for trucks." The Red Ball Express also changed the U.S. Army itself. The success of African-American drivers under segregation exposed the contradiction of a divided military. Eisenhower's personal reports praised their endurance. His aide recorded, "The general said these men are winning the war as surely as any infantry." The recognition did not erase inequality, but it forced the beginning of change. 3 years later, the U.S. Armed Forces were formally desegregated. After the war, veterans of the Red Ball Express carried their experience into civilian life. They founded trucking companies, designed interstate routes, and shaped modern logistics. The lessons they learned on French roads, standardization, round-the-clock operation, interchangeable parts, became the foundation of the post-war American economy. The convoy that fed an army ended up feeding a nation. Historians later called the Red Ball Express the decisive supply operation of the European campaign. It shortened the war by months and proved that the industrial age had transformed combat. The German generals who once laughed at American logistics surrendered less than a year later to armies that never stopped moving. They had discovered too late that in modern war, motion itself is the final weapon. The roads of France still carry traffic where the convoys once ran. The ruts, the bridges, and the scars remain faintly visible under asphalt. Every passing truck traces their path. The Red Ball Express turned the mathematics of supply into the language of victory. The generals stopped laughing. The engines never did.